The noise at my cousin's birthday party was a wall of sound, but I felt completely alone. I stood near the lavish dessert table, a ghost in a room full of my own family. My mother, Evelyn, was holding court at the center of it all, her laughter sharp and commanding. I tried to make myself smaller, but her eyes, like lasers, found me across the room. A hush fell around her as she pointed a perfectly manicured finger in my direction. "Oh, that one," she announced, her voice dripping with false sadness. "We don't talk about that one. Not after what she did." The entire crowd turned to stare at me. My cheeks burned with a familiar, searing humiliation. I felt frozen, a statue of shame. Then, the host, my cousin's husband Tom, stepped forward. He looked from my mother's smug face to my pained one. "Actually," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Maybe we should." A ripple of nervous excitement went through the guests. My mother, Evelyn, was not one to be challenged. She squared her shoulders, a predator sensing a shift in the wind. "Really, Tom? And what is there to say?" she scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. "How she tried to destroy her own sister. How she tarnished our family's good name with her lies. She spun the old, poisonous story with practiced ease." A few sycophantic relatives chuckled, their laughter feeling like physical blows. The room began to spin. My hand, holding a glass of wine, started to tremble uncontrollably. The glass slipped, shattering on the marble floor in a burst of crimson liquid and crystal shards. The sound was deafening. In the stunned silence that followed, Tom was suddenly beside me. He leaned in close, his whisper for my ears only. "Claire," he murmured. "I think it's time they saw the truth." His words transported me back 3 years. I was in my father's old office, the scent of old paper and ink filling the air. My sister, Lydia, stood crying over spreadsheets she claimed she couldn't understand. Our mother had begged me, "Just sign the audit, Claire. Your sister was confused, that's all. We'll fix it later." But the number screamed fraud. Forged contracts, misappropriated funds. To sign would be to take the blame. I refused. The fallout was swift and brutal. I was cut off from the family finances, fired from the company, and my name was dragged through the mud. My mother told everyone I was jealous, unstable. I lost everything in a single day. I was living in a tiny apartment, surrounded by the silence of my broken life, when my phone rang. The number was unknown. I answered, my voice hollow. "Claire," a man's voice said. "My name is Eli Grant. I'm a journalist. I think we need to talk about your family." I met Eli Grant in a quiet, sunlit cafe far from my old neighborhood. He was younger than I expected, with intense, earnest eyes. He slid a file folder across the table. "I've been looking into your family's company for months," he explained. "The inconsistencies, the sudden departure of key staff. The story doesn't add up. Not unless there was a scapegoat." I opened the folder. Inside were documents, emails I'd never seen, all pointing to Lydia's systematic embezzlement. My hand shook as I flipped through the pages. It was all there, the evidence I'd been begging someone to see for years. Eli watched me carefully. "They built a narrative about you to protect themselves," he said softly. "But this," he tapped the folder, "this tells a different story." "Your story." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "I'm doing a segment on corporate whistleblowers and family dynamics. Would you be willing to go on record?" My first instinct was to say no. Fear was a cold stone in my stomach. Retaliation from my family was a guaranteed outcome. They had powerful friends and a vindictive streak. "I can't," I whispered, pushing the folder back. "You don't know what they're like." Eli nodded, understanding. "I can't force you. But think about it. This isn't just about clearing your name. It's about preventing them from doing this to someone else." He left me with the folder. For days, it sat on my coffee table, a silent accusation. I looked at my life, the isolation, the shame I carried like a second skin. I thought of my mother's triumphant smile as she exiled me. Finally, I called Eli. We filmed the interview over 2 long, emotional days. I told him everything. When we finished, I was exhausted but lighter. Eli's phone rang as I was leaving. I heard his producer's excited voice through the receiver. Eli, the footage, it's explosive. Now, back in the present, Tom's whisper pulled me from the memory. The party guests were still staring, their expressions a mix of pity and morbid curiosity. My mother was fuming at the interruption. Tom ignored her and walked calmly over to the large smart TV mounted on the wall. Everyone, he announced cheerfully, picking up a remote. As a special part of the celebrations, I put together a little family montage. My mother's frown softened slightly, she loved any tribute to our perfect family. She shot me a triumphant look, believing Tom was about to showcase her and Lydia. The screen flickered to life. But instead of childhood photos or wedding videos, the screen filled with a clean, professional studio set. The logo for Eli Grant's investigative show, Granted Truth, appeared in the corner. A collective, confused murmur filled the room. My blood ran cold. This was not the montage anyone was expecting. My own face, clear and calm, filled the massive screen. I was sitting in the interview chair, my hands folded in my lap. Eli's voice, smooth and professional, asked the first question. Claire, tell us about the event that led to your estrangement from your family. On screen, I took a soft breath. They asked me to lie to protect my sister, my recorded voice stated, echoing through the now silent party room. I refused. A unified gasp sucked the air out of the room. I stood frozen, watching myself. My mother's smile didn't just fade, it shattered. Her face went slack with disbelief, then tightened into a mask of pure rage. Lydia, who had been preening near the champagne fountain, looked as if she'd been slapped. The room was captivated, every eye glued to the screen, listening to my quiet voice tell a story they had only ever heard from my mother's twisted perspective. The interview played on, my voice steady as I detailed the forged documents, the pressure from my mother, the impossible choice. I spoke of the loneliness, the character assassination, the way my own family turned into strangers. On the screen, Eli presented documents, the same ones he'd shown me in the cafe. Copies of the forged contracts were displayed, alongside handwriting analysis reports that pointed to Lydia. Bank statements appeared, tracing funds from company accounts into Lydia's private ones. The evidence was undeniable, presented with cold, journalistic clarity. The guests watched, their earlier mockery replaced by dawning understanding and horror. Whispers began, not about me, but about my mother and sister. Lydia, my mother finally shrieked, breaking the spell. Turn that off this instant. But Tom stood firm, his arms crossed. No, he said, his voice ringing with authority. I think everyone deserves to hear this. Chaos erupted. Lydia rushed toward the television, but other guests, now curious and angry at being deceived, subtly blocked her path. My mother was sputtering, her face a terrifying shade of purple. It's all lies. Digital manipulation. She's sick, she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. But no one was listening to her anymore. Phones were raised, recording the screen, recording her meltdown. The social facade she had spent a lifetime building was crumbling in real time. I watched it happen, a strange numbness settling over me. Then, I found my voice. It was quiet, but it cut through the noise. That's the real me, Mom, I said, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. The one you said didn't exist. The one who told the truth. I didn't wait for a response. I turned and walked away from the wreckage of the party. My legs felt weak, but my spine was straight for the first time in years. I pushed through the front door and out into the cool, evening air, gulping it down like a drowning woman reaching the surface. The door swung shut, muffling the sounds of the ongoing chaos inside. I leaned against the side of the house, my entire body trembling from the adrenaline. A car door closed nearby. I looked up, and there was Eli Grant, leaning against his sedan, a small, sympathetic smile on his face. He had come to witness the fallout. He walked toward me. "They're going to deny everything, you know," he said gently. "They'll try to spin this. Are you ready for part 2? Part 2 was the national broadcast. Eli's segment, The Family Scapegoat, aired 2 nights later. It was longer and more detailed than the clip Tom had played. It featured financial experts and legal commentators dissecting the evidence. The public reaction was swift and brutal. News articles picked up the story, focusing on the verified public records that confirmed my version of events. The district attorney's office, under public pressure, announced it was reopening the investigation into Lydia's fraud. My mother's carefully curated reputation as a community pillar and philanthropist evaporated overnight. Her social media feeds were flooded with angry comments. 1 week after the party, a process server arrived at my mother's mansion. He handed her a crisp white envelope. It was a subpoena, demanding her testimony in the official investigation. My mother did not go down quietly. Her retaliation was a vicious smear campaign. She gave a tearful interview to a rival news outlet, claiming I had always been a troubled child, a pathological liar. She hinted at mental instability, at a jealous obsession with my sister. She dug up old, out-of-context photos from my college days, painting a picture of a wild, unreliable woman. For a moment, I felt the old fear creeping back in. What if people believed her? What if her lies were more powerful than my truth? Then, my phone buzzed. It was a number I hadn't seen in years, Marcus, my old boss at the company I'd been fired from. I answered hesitantly. "Claire," his voice was firm, apologetic. "I saw the news. I saw what your mother is saying. We all knew, deep down. I think it's time we helped you clear your name for good." Marcus arranged a meeting with the new board of directors. They offered me a consulting position for a major, independent ethics audit of the entire company. It was a chance to officially cleanse the company's records and my own. It was also a staggering vote of confidence. I hesitated. The thought of being entangled with that world again was terrifying. But it was also a path to full, legal vindication. After a long, sleepless night, I accepted. The news of my hiring was made public, a direct rebuke of my mother's narrative. The day the press release went out, my phone lit up with a call. The screen flashed with a single word I hadn't seen in years, Mom. She was trying to contact me for the first time since she had cast me out. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a neutral cafe. She was already there, looking smaller and older than I remembered. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She reached for my hands, her voice a trembling whisper. "Claire, my darling, you've made your point. You've embarrassed us enough." Her grip tightened, her nails digging into my skin. The fake tears vanished, replaced by a cold, hard glare. "End it now. Drop the consulting job. Stop talking to that reporter. Or you will regret it." It was not an apology, it was a threat, delivered with a venomous hiss. I had seen this switch too many times. As she spoke, my hand was in my pocket. I felt for the button on my phone and pressed record. I left the cafe with a perfect, clear audio recording of my mother's attempted coercion. I sent it directly to Eli. His second interview with me was different from the first. This time, I was not a vulnerable victim, but a calm, factual whistleblower. I played the recording for his audience. I presented documents that showed my mother's direct involvement in covering up the fraud, evidence that went beyond protecting Lydia. I was no longer just defending myself, I was on the offensive. The public support for me swelled. News commentators praised my courage. But as Eli drove me home after the taping, his phone buzzed. He listened for a moment, his face growing grim. He ended the call and looked at me. "The public is on your side, Claire. But my legal desk just got word. Lydia is planning to sue you for defamation." Lydia's lawsuit was a desperate, last-ditch effort to silence me. The courtroom felt like a final battleground. Her lawyer painted me as a jealous sister seeking revenge. But my lawyer, paid for by the consulting fee from my old company, was brilliant. He systematically dismantled their case. He presented the recorded conversation with my mother. Then, he presented a new piece of evidence, a series of emails between my mother and Lydia, recovered from an old server. The emails explicitly discussed transferring the stolen funds and, crucially, which family member would make the most believable scapegoat. My name was mentioned repeatedly. Lydia's lies collapsed on the witness stand. The judge, looking disgusted, not only threw out the defamation case but also sanctioned Lydia for wasting the court's time. He then issued a surprising ruling. He ordered Lydia to pay restitution for my lost wages and emotional distress. The fallout was absolute. The story of the courtroom defeat was the final nail in the coffin. My mother was forced to resign from her prestigious position as president of her exclusive social club. The charity board she sat on quietly asked for her resignation. The society pages, which had once adored her, now ran stories about her downfall. The most shocking news came a week later. Lydia's husband, a man who had always enjoyed the lavish lifestyle her money provided, filed for divorce and full custody of their children, citing her pattern of deceit. The family empire was in ruins, and they had no one to blame but themselves. Reporters camped outside my apartment, shouting questions. One finally broke through. "Claire, do you forgive them?" I stopped and looked at the young woman, her microphone thrust toward me. I thought for a long moment. "Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting," I said calmly. "I hope they find peace, but I will never forget what they did. And I will never again allow them to dictate my story." With the restitution money and my consulting salary, I bought a small, sunny cottage near a quiet lake. I started teaching a class on business ethics at the local community college. I was building a new life, one made of truth and peace. One morning, I found a letter in my mailbox. The handwriting was instantly recognizable, sharp and elegant. It was from Evelyn. The letter was not an apology. It was a plea. The IRS had opened an audit into her personal finances, spurred by the publicity. She was facing massive penalties. "You have to help me," she wrote. "You have connections now. Explain it was a misunderstanding. You're still my daughter, Claire. Family helps family." The audacity of it took my breath away. There was no remorse, only a transactional demand for a rescue. She saw me not as a person she had wronged, but as a tool that was no longer functioning to her benefit. I read the letter twice, feeling a strange emptiness where my anger used to be. I carefully folded the paper, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it in a drawer in my old desk. I did not write back. I did not call. I simply closed the drawer. The extended family, once a united front under my mother's rule, fractured. Aunts, uncles, and cousins I hadn't heard from in years began reaching out. Some offered hesitant apologies for not believing me. Others sent messages of support. Of course, a faction remained loyal to my mother, calling me a traitor who had aired private family laundry. The family group chats exploded with arguments. It was messy and complicated, but it was real. In the midst of this, Tom, my cousin's husband, called me. "Claire," he said, his voice warm. "The family, the ones who matter, we're doing another gathering. A real one. This time, it's in your honor." I was nervous walking up to Tom's house again. The memories of the last party were still fresh. But when I opened the door, the atmosphere was completely different. A wave of warmth and noise washed over me. The moment I stepped inside, a cheer went up. People surrounded me, hugging me, shaking my hand, looking me directly in the eye with respect and admiration. They talked to me, asked about my teaching, my new house. For the first time in my life, I felt seen and valued for who I truly was. As I laughed at a story Tom was telling, I caught a movement at the edge of the room. Standing alone in the shadows, half hidden by the kitchen doorframe, was my mother. She looked small, shrunken, and utterly alone. As the party wound down, she approached me. The confident, imposing woman was gone, replaced by a nervous, aging one. Her hands trembled slightly. "You won," she said, her voice barely a whisper. It was an admission of defeat, but it was still framed as a competition. I looked at her, and I felt a profound sense of pity. "No, Mom," I replied softly. "I didn't win. I healed. There's a difference." She opened her mouth to respond, but a commotion at the front door interrupted her. Two uniformed officers entered, their eyes scanning the room. They walked directly toward Lydia. We watched in stunned silence as they spoke to her, then placed her in handcuffs. Her lawyer had failed to file a motion on time, and she was being taken into custody for contempt of court. The crowd gasped as they led my sobbing sister away. I stepped outside onto the back patio, needing air. The night was cool and clear. I leaned on the railing, and to my own surprise, a laugh bubbled up, a release of all the tension, fear, and pain. Tears mixed with the laughter. Eli joined me quietly, a small camera on his shoulder. For a follow-up, he explained. He didn't turn on a bright light, just let the camera see me in the moonlight. "One last question, Claire. What would you say to the girl they once ignored? The one in the corner?" I glanced back at the warm, lit windows of the house, then up at the stars. A deep sense of peace settled over me. "I'd tell her she was always enough," I said. And that her voice was always worth hearing. The follow-up segment, Finding Enough, aired the next week. It was quieter, more reflective. It showed me teaching my class, walking by the lake at my cottage, speaking about healing. It ended with that nighttime clip on the patio. The response was overwhelming. The clip was shared millions of times. Viewers flooded the comments section. "She's what real strength looks like," wrote one person. "This wasn't about revenge, it was about resurrection," wrote another. My inbox filled with messages from people who had faced similar family betrayals, thanking me for giving them the courage to speak their own truth. Months later, a recording of one of my college lectures went viral. I was talking about ethical courage. "Standing up for yourself isn't revenge," I told my students. "It's reclaiming your story. It's the bravest thing you can do." Meanwhile, in her large, silent mansion, my mother sat alone in her living room. The video of my lecture played on her tablet. She watched it, her face illuminated by the cold blue light. As I spoke about peace and self-worth, a single, genuine tear traced a path through her powder. She did not wipe it away. The final scene was mine alone. I was sitting on the dock behind my cottage, a cup of tea in my hands. The morning sun rose over the lake, setting the water on fire with gold and orange light. It caught in my hair, warming my skin. I took a deep, contented breath. I was free. I was vindicated. I was, finally and completely, heard.